All right, today we're talking about the bureaucracy. I know at the beginning of this unit on the executive branch, we talked about on the very first page of your notes who is in what branch and who does what. And in the executive branch, I had you write president plus the bureaucracy. Well, the president cannot enforce every single law everywhere all by himself every day. That is physically impossible for one human to do. So the bureaucracy is a system of non-elected officials that work to implement rules and policies. Basically, they're the whole squad of people who help the president enforce the law. Okay? It's thousands and thousands of people. It's not just a couple people who are the secretary of whatever. Okay? It's plenty of people who help the president carry out and enforce laws from day to day. All right, so today is a day for listening. Okay? This is a listening check for you. If you can hear me right now and you are watching, please put a smiley face in the upper right-hand corner of your notes. All right. There are 15 departments under the president. There are 15 departments, and each one is led by someone called a secretary. Each department is led by a secretary, except for one department. Okay, there's 15 total. Each department is led by a secretary except for the Department of Justice. Okay, and the person who is the head of the Department of Justice is not called the Secretary of Justice. He or she is called the Attorney General. Okay, so like Department of State, Department of Defense, Department of the Treasury, whoever is the leader of that department is called the Secretary of State or the Secretary of Defense or the Secretary of the Treasury. Every single one of them, there's 14 people who hold the title of Secretary. Okay, and the only person who doesn't is the head of the Department of Justice because they are an attorney. They are actually able to practice law. Okay, so they are called the Attorney General. All right, this is the old cabinet under President Obama and Vice President Joe Biden. This cabinet has changed significantly since this picture was taken. All right, so the first one, these are some of the seals of each department. So you've got agriculture, commerce, defense, education, energy, human service, health and human services, homeland security, housing and urban development, the interior, which is natural resources, national parks, Native American affairs, all that good stuff. I don't know why this thing won't go away. All right, the Department of Justice, labor, state, I think that one has already been put up, transportation, and veterans affairs in the Treasury. All right, so Department of State, we're going back up just a little bit. Why won't this go away? Okay, there we go. All right, the Department of State, where's the seal? Man, dang. All right, here we go, bottom right-hand corner. The Department of State, the leader is the Secretary of State, okay? And the Department of State is about foreign affairs. So you need to put down on your note sheet the leader, who is the Secretary of State, and that it's about foreign affairs and foreign policy. Okay, so things that happen overseas. The Department of the Treasury, which I think is over here. I have to reorganize this stuff. There we go. This one right here with the scales of justice. The Department of the Treasury the leader is the Secretary of the Treasury, and the Department of the Treasury deals with money. Deals with making money, saving it, spending it, borrowing it, everything to do with money. Okay. The Department of Defense is the leader of it is the Secretary of Defense. Okay, so here's the eagles. Remember how I told you there's olive branches as well as arrows on the Department of Defense seal? Well, there's the arrows in the little eagle's feet, and there's some olive branches around the bottom. Okay. All right, so the Department of Defense leader is the Secretary of Defense. This department houses all 5 branches of the military. So the Department of Defense is about all 5 branches of the military. The Department of Justice is next up on our list, and remember, their leader is called the Attorney General. The Attorney General. And the Department of Justice deals with the court system. The court system. All right, the Department of Homeland Security. There we go. The Department of Homeland Security, the leader is the Secretary of Homeland Security. And this is about preventing terrorism in the United States. Okay, this department is about defending against or preventing terrorism in the United States. So Homeland Security. This is separate from the Department of Defense. Okay, so Homeland Security is the youngest department. It was formed in 2002 after the attacks on 9/11. Okay, all right, so in each of these departments, there are separate things called agencies that are embedded in them. Here we go, so FBI, awesome movie. Okay, so for example, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. See how that says bureau, like bureaucracy? A lot of these used to be called the so-and-so Bureau or the Bureau of Business, okay? It's the Better Business Bureau or Citizenship and Immigration. A lot of these, when they were first started, were called bureaus of something. That's not a bureau as in a piece of furniture. That's a bureau as in like a squad of people who help the president do something, okay? Like the Drug Enforcement Agency or DEA. Helpful hint, you need to write what all of these mean, okay? The FBI is like the federal police, okay? The Drug Enforcement Agency, obviously they protect against all kinds of illegal drugs. Don't do them. It's a bad choice. All right, the Central Intelligence Agency or the CIA are like U.S. police, but for information. So they're the United States Info Police, and they are in other countries. So U.S. Info Police in other countries. All right, a lot of them are covert operatives, so you don't know who they are or what their name is typically. All right, so that's the FBI, DEA, and CIA. The National Guard, all right, is a branch of the military who is housed in each state. Okay, so the National Guard is a branch of the military who is housed in each state. The Better Business Bureau enforces good business practices. So if you go somewhere and you paid for a service and you did not receive it, or somebody is taking money from people that they shouldn't be taking money from, you can report them to the Better Business Bureau, and that business will be investigated, and if it is found to be in the wrong, they will be shut down. Okay, Citizenship and Immigration Services, or CIS, are in charge of legal and illegal immigration into the United States. Okay, so if you would like to get your citizenship, you're going to have to go through CIS. If you are being deported, it is through CIS. Okay, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, right, is in charge of natural disaster aid and relief. Okay, so like when Hurricane Katrina came through in 2005, FEMA was in charge. I think it was 2005. It was back in the early 2000s. Anyways, so FEMA went down to Louisiana and into New Orleans, Louisiana, and surrounding areas, and set up trailers and gave out blankets and food and water, anything that people could use for relief from this disaster. All right, the ATF, or the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Agency, all right, they are obviously in charge. They also include fireworks in there, so firearms and fireworks. All right, so they are in charge of enforcing violations of alcohol policy, tobacco policy, or firearms. So if you are caught underage drinking on federal property, you're going to go to the ATF and then to the court system for processing. All right, so if somebody is, let's say that somebody's running like a gun smuggling ring or something, the ATF is going to investigate them. It won't be the FBI, all right, because the FBI is worried about like serial killers and people who are robbing stores across multiple state lines. Okay, the ATF specifically focuses on these three things, or violations of policy on these three things. All right, and then we should all know who the IRS is. All right, the Internal Revenue Service. Revenue just means money that comes in to a business or organization. Okay, so if you don't pay your taxes, they are coming at you for everything that you own. They will take it all from you. Okay, so even if you don't have any cash to pay them or any money in your bank accounts, they will put what's called a lien on your house. They will garnish your wages. So part of your paycheck is not going to you anymore. It's going to the IRS to pay off those taxes that you should have paid in the first place. Okay? So the IRS is in charge of collecting money for the government. So if you don't pay your taxes, they're going to be knocking on your door. All right, so something to consider as well. Here is a good visual of how the executive branch works, okay? So at the top we have the president, all right, and then we have the chief of staff. This person is not the chief of staff anymore. There have been multiple chiefs of staff at this point. Here is Mike Pence, the vice president. There's a whole bunch of other people on committees who help out in the executive office of the president. So we have the president, their executive office, including the VP and other people on committees in both the House and the Senate. Then you have all the secretaries, all right, and then you have departments, so 15 of them total. All right, and then you have agencies within each department. So here's the chain of command from top to bottom, okay? All right, so the North Carolina bureaucracy, something that you need to think about, is similar to the federal bureaucracy, okay, except agencies and departments assist the governor in enforcing the law rather than the president, okay? So, for example, we have the SBI or the State Bureau of Investigation instead of the FBI. They could work together to investigate crime, but the North Carolina bureaucracy is similar in that it does enforce the law, but it is about enforcing state law instead. All right, so at the top of your paper, I would like for you to not write this, what's on the screen, but write what I'm telling you. Okay, so at the very top above where it says bureaucracy, above the title, okay, I would like you to put a star and write the word cabinet, C-A-B-I-N-E-T, cabinet, all right? The cabinet is the group of secretaries, okay? It is all secretaries and the Attorney General put together. So it is the head of all 15 departments. All right, so when the president has a meeting for the cabinet, all right, that means all 15 secretaries, including the attorney general, all of them get together, and they are the president's advisors. So a group of president's advisors, group of people who informs the president, heads of all 15 departments, however you'd like to define that, as long as you know what cabinet means, so that word does not jump out at you and surprise you on a test later somewhere. Just saying, okay? All right, so again, you have 5 departments you need to know. You may or may not see some of these agencies at the bottom later, maybe on like a test somewhere, just saying, okay? So let's go back for just a second and review some of these agencies, just in case you didn't get a chance to write them already, okay? So again, the FBI is about federal law, enforcing federal law. Drug Enforcement Agency, obviously, enforcing policies on illegal drugs and narcotics and all kinds of substances. The Central Intelligence Agency, or the CIA, is like an international version of U.S. police, okay? But they're focused on intelligence rather than starting a war, okay? So CIA operatives, or basically spies, okay, it's like James Bond kind of stuff, will go over to another country that we probably are not friends with, and if we are trying to take down a person or a group who is a threat to national security, we will send somebody in the CIA to go over there and be sneaky and figure out what they know, bring that information back to the United States, and then we can move from there, all right? The National Guard is basically the state version of the branches of the military. Okay, the Better Business Bureau, again, is about enforcing good business practices. CIS, or Citizenship and Immigration Services, are in charge of, obviously, immigration policy into and out of the U.S. They are also in charge of things that come into the United States, so like customs and that kind of thing. If you come back into the United States, like if you're flying in from another country, you might have to fill out a form of like, do you have any stuff from that country? And you always say no unless you have stuff in your carry-on. So they can search your bag for whatever there is, because if you're coming from another country that we are not friends with, you might have your bag searched just in case you're bringing back some shady stuff from that country, okay? FEMA, again, is about disaster relief, natural disaster relief and aid. ATF, or the Alcohol and Tobacco and Firearms Agency, are about the enforcement of policy about those 3 things in particular. Okay, and the IRS is coming for your money if you don't pay your taxes. Okay, so again, the bureaucracy is the group of people who are non-elected officials, so they are what by the president? Hope you can answer this question. All right, and again, their job is to help the president enforce the law.